year is 1999, and the sovereignty of Macau returns to the People's Republic of China. After almost 500 years of Portuguese rule, the central government in Beijing is eager to bring new life and energy to the harbor. Part of this plan involves loosening the grip of power from Stanley Ho, whose 40-year casino monopoly makes him a dominant force in every part of life and the economy in Macau.
He was one of Hong Kong's original tycoons and one of Asia's richest men.
Local media dubbed Stanley Ho the king of gambling, and he was synonymous with Macau's rise to global prominence.
Asia's richest men, a tycoon in the former Portuguese colony.
4 decades, Ho held the only gaming concession in the territory.
At its peak, his businesses generate almost 70% of the government's revenue, compared to a mere 20% for the mighty Samsung's contribution to its home country. Rather than fight it, Stanley, now 78 years young, fully supports the breakup of his monopoly and welcomes a new era. Though his share will be smaller, he knows the market will be larger, much larger. And this is a story of Stanley Ho, a masterclass in survival and how to transform every major challenge into a winning hand. The beginning, from riches to rags. His story begins in 1921. Imagine being born into one of the 4 powerful families that rule over pre-war Hong Kong. Your father owns a hospital chain, and Grandpa is a member of the Legislative Council. Bruce Lee is a cousin, and your granduncle is one of the first Eurasians to be knighted on the island. You have a high bar to live up to, but your life doesn't start smoothly. At the age of 8, the Great Depression hits. Your family manages for a while, but your father's stock market speculation bankrupts the family. After all, wealthy people can be degenerates too. So your old man abandons the family and flees to Saigon, and your mother is heartbroken. The affluence you've always come to know is no more. It's so bad, you're malnutrition most of the time, and there's no way to pay the dentist to treat your nagging toothache. Old friends and relatives avoid you now, and you try not to get too close to girls smitten by your good looks. It's not lost on you that you don't have the money, even for a coffee date. And perhaps during this time, you do the one thing you can, turn around your studies at school, because your only hope of going to college is through scholarship. And you did it, from second last to top of the class in a year. And you make it to college, and you enjoy it. But that too is inconveniently interrupted by the war, following the Japanese attacks on Pearl Harbor. And within 2 weeks, Japan invades Hong Kong, and the island falls by Christmas. And having worked as an air warden in Hong Kong's defense, you quickly throw away your uniform for fear of Japanese prosecution, and you contemplate your next move. Though you may be poor, you do have a few options, given your family's rich history. A new life in Macau. The story told around the world is that you went to Macau with 10 Hong Kong dollars in your pocket as a refugee and came out a winner. The reality, let's just say, was a little more involved. See, your great-uncle is still wealthy and influential and doing quite well in Macau. He sees an opportunity to get rich off the war and asks you to join him there. 2 days after you arrive in Macau, your great-uncle takes you to the governor's house on a mission that will last almost 4 years. You're tasked with teaching English to the head of the Japanese intelligence, Colonel Sawa, who effectively acts as shadow chief over all economics activities in Macau. But wait, isn't this the very enemy you were running away from in Hong Kong in the first place? While Portugal and by extension Macau province remained neutral until 1944, they had a dilemma following Japan's annexation of Hong Kong. Japan now controlled all the seas and ports around Macau, which meant that Macau had to cooperate with the Japanese just to bring in basic supplies. And the problem was growing, given Chinese and European refugees were increasing by the day. Between World War I and World War II, population grew 5-fold in the span of 30 years, from 75,000 to 375,000. In exchange for food, Macau provided the Japanese military really anything and everything of value, including ships, cannons, and communication equipment. The unlikely Barter King of Macau. The Macau government and the Japanese had an idea. Why not standardize this barter between the locals and the Japanese? And thus, the Macau Cooperative Company, CCM, was born, a company that would be owned a third by Dr. Lobo, the head of the Bureau of Economic Services, a third by the wealthy families of Macau, and a third by the Japanese army. This setup would help the Macau government address the basic needs of the people, allow the government to control the circulation of all essential goods in Macau, and the business to profit from supply shortages. And who did Dr. Lobo consult to run this company? None other than Stanley's great-uncle, Sir Robert Ho Tung. And as you probably guessed, he recommends his 20-year-old great-nephew for the role. Now, you might be thinking, why would this group of government, military, and business elites trust a 20-year-old to run it? This might shed some light. I was in charge of a barter system helping the Macau government to exchange machinery and equipment with the Japanese in exchange for rice, sugar, beans. I was a semi-government official then. I was the middleman. And to be clear, this was no office job. Sure, you had to pick up Japanese and Portuguese quickly, but your real mission was to keep Macau fed by bartering anything on the island of value and travel regularly by boat with payments to receive the goods and get them back to Macau. If it involves paying off Portuguese authorities, the Japanese military, triad gangs, and the various factions of China, on your trip between French Indochina and Macau, you'll have no shortage of the enterprising indifferent to taking your gold on the outbound voyage or your supplies on the inbound. To them, it was a lucrative bounty either way. Along the way, nationalists and communist factions from China, pirates, Japanese naval vessels, and American and British submarines were all equally likely to attack, either for profit, entertainment, or for collaborating with the enemy. You're given $1 million bonus for taking on this role, and the fancy title of a secretary. But if things go wrong, you're replaceable, likely by another young man looking to leave his mark on the world. While you do most of the work, and the rich and powerful gets most of the benefits, there are some side perks to the job. For instance, you see public fuel supplies are running low, so you opportunistically open a kerosene factory. So when America, concerned with the complete takeover of Macau, bombs the island's gasoline terminal in early 1945 to deny supply to the Japanese Navy and Air Forces, you are left as the only supplier. You become extremely rich. Though much had been gained, it wasn't without controversy. See, to the Japanese, he was seen as a Japanese collaborator. Chinese officials attempted to arrest him, and by his own account, it was the Portuguese colonial police who protected him. By late 1945, Ho was too entrenched, too important to Macau's economy for the Portuguese administration to hand him over to China. In his defense, Ho claimed he worked with the Japanese because it was an order of the Portuguese government, and that without food, the Macau people will starve. He also said in his memoir, to him, Macau was paradise during the war. Joining the club. By the end of World War II, you're a made man. You have cash, social status, family, and friends in high places. You have a lifelong relationship with Dr. Lobo, the unofficial boss of Macau. Your marriage to the daughter of a wealthy Portuguese family in 1942 secures you protection, social position, and vital trade information on account of his status as the only licensed public notary at the time and active involvement in the hospitality industry, which possibly already included the casino business. You now own thriving businesses in rice trading, kerosene, and construction. Within weeks of Japanese surrender, you're back in Hong Kong buying boats to start a post-war ferry service between the two colonies. And before gaming, there was gold. But post-World War II, the real place to be in Macau was gold. See, a year ago, 44 Western countries had agreed in Bretton Woods to fix the price of gold to $35 per troy ounce. And since Macau was not subject to this peg, an arbitrage naturally opened up. Our friend Dr. Lobo, who still heads the Bureau of Economic Services, happens to control the issuing and granting of all licenses for import, which includes gold. And the opportunity was so great, Dr. Lobo decides to set up a company for himself and his associates to own this monopoly on gold trading. Years later, his exploits are so great that it would later inspire the character Goldfinger in Ian Fleming's James Bond. Naturally, Stanley Ho wanted a piece of the action, but was denied an exclusive contract on account of the need for political alignment with the PRC and economical differences as the main reason, given the PRC's impression of him is at an all-time low. This lesson would not be forgotten. Another war, another chance to get rich. A few years later, Korea descends into war and the U.S. places an embargo on China under the United Nations resolutions of May 1951. But you know all this ahead of time given your network, and you have just the business model. Use your import licenses to legitimize cargo from Hong Kong and change the final destination from Macau to the PRC. You're able to do this successfully for years, but it was always likely you'll be caught at some point. The Americans find out and you're disallowed from importing refrigerators and air conditioners, the high technology of the 1950s, but you gain something more valuable, friendly terms with the PRC. Years later, when you apply for the gaming license in Macau, questions arise about your standing with the Chinese. Your lawyer tells the Portuguese government to consult the American embassy whether you're considered a friend or foe, and the reply is, Stanley Ho has been running the blockade for several years, so he and the Chinese should be very close friends. So this works well for you, and all choices have two sides. While it cements your status in the East, you become more alienated to the West. The U.S. Department of Commerce revokes all licensing privileges and denies your export licenses in 1959. You become persona non grata in the U.S., which will remain in place until death. A new sheriff in town. In the 1960s, a unique opportunity presents itself. A new bid for the exclusive gambling concession was proposed after deciding the gambling industry drastically needed to change. Issues cited include the need to clean up underground elements, new facilities, restrict gambling to foreign players, diversify the clientele, and for new funds to combat drug use and prostitution. You're close to the nexus of power, so you know exactly what the government intends, and you come up with this proposal. The unified purpose is to develop tourism and the entertainment business in order to achieve a new prosperity for Macau, and as a means to bring about the improvement of the welfare and living standard of the citizens of Macau. And your motivation can be aptly summarized here. I have got this franchise because it was a challenge for me, because I cannot understand why, as 40 miles apart, Hong Kong was so prosperous and Macau was a dying city. So again, I love challenges. I put in a bid and I won the concession. And as luck would have it, you win the license. But you create some powerful enemies along the way too. YC Liu, a powerful owner of a gold deal concessionaire, set threats just before the start of your operation. His 5 threats include: 1. If you dare to operate a casino, you'll die after 7 days. My aides will shoot you. 2. No person in Macau will dare to lease you any place for opening a casino. 3. No one will be helping you. I'll get the former casino operators to continue to pay their staff. 4. I'll arrange 200 beggars to surround your casino so no one will dare to go in. And 5. All the ferries will start running and you'll not be able to bring your customers to Macau. And how does our protagonist respond? These don't sound like empty threats, considering who it's coming from. Surely, there can't be a better way to start your life as a casino kingpin than that. Subscribe now and stay tuned for part 2 on what comes next in a deep dive into his gaming empire. Until next time.